by reminding us how we got to where we are today. We're now smack in the middle of what's called Sefer HaChalamot, the Book of Dreams in the Babylonian Talmud. And as I have mentioned before, not in great depth, but I think we will perhaps in the next one or two times that we meet. We'll talk about perhaps some of the parallels in other non-rabbinic cultures, non-Jewish cultures, in fact. And just to say that this goes on for pages, we won't finish this. I'm telling you, right, we won't finish the entire section of the Babylonian Talmud on dreams. I mean, we could, but I think at sometime in September, we're going to be going back to our studies, our biblical studies. That is at this spot, the Thursday morning spot. So we might pick another time to do this, but I'm not sure we could persevere, to tell you the truth. Not many persevere in this book of dreams in the Babylonian Talmud. In fact, in the yeshiva world, this chapter is barely studied. And in the yeshiva world, that is the Orthodox, old-fashioned way of studying Talmud, when you get to the Agadic parts, which we're in an Agadic part, Agadah as opposed to Halacha. Halacha is what we do. It comes from the word to walk, how we walk through our lives in actions from a Jewish point of view. And Agadah comes from the word lahagid, to tell the story. Storytelling is what we tell ourselves, our hearts, our souls, our beliefs, our faiths, the embellishment of biblical stories. All that falls under the category of Agadah. And so when in the yeshiva world, when you get to the Agadic parts of the Talmud, very often you skip over it. You're expected to learn it on yourself, but the lecture is not about that. Even if you're going through an entire chapter of Talmud, or if you're going through an entire tractate of Talmud, very often they'll whisk through the Agadic parts. Of course, for me, I went the opposite direction, especially when I got to the university, and my main focus was on biblical studies. I was looking to the Talmud for biblical interpretation from the hermeneutic point of view, and so those passages interested me more. Dreams are in the nexus of those two worlds, believe it or not, right? Because, well, do we have any any psychiatrists with us? I don't think so, right? So if we had a Freudian psychiatrist here, I'm sure we would have somebody talk very practically about dreams, right? There's a lot of work to be done about dreams. Maybe some of you have done dream work yourself, or kept journals and things like that. But dreams, as we're going to see in the final passage today, we're going to see the beginning of a halachic discourse about dreams. But until now, what we've had about dreams in the last one or two, it was hinted at 2 times ago, and the last time, that is 2 weeks ago, we had it. It was almost all about dreams, dreams and prophecy, and those two worlds touch. The way we got there was, just to sum up, especially for those that weren't with us every time or don't remember every time, we started this chapter in the Babylonian Talmud of the tractate of brachot, blessings, about the blessings you are to make when you are at a place where a miracle has happened, when a miracle has happened to you, or when a miracle has happened to the people of Israel, to your nation. And from there we got to a wonderful passage from the same time of the Mishnah, the earlier level of the earlier phase of Talmudic literature, which is from oral traditions that were compiled in the 3rd century, but they're oral traditions from the first 2-3 centuries of the Common Era, 2.5. And while the Mishnah spoke about very specific cases in what happens in your life, the Braita, which is a non-canonical, I know I'm using too many words, but this will repeat too many unknown words. This will repeat some material that we covered in the past for those, just to bring us up to date. A passage from the collection of oral traditions that did not get into the Mishnah. So it's not in the canon, so to speak, of the Mishnah. That talked about very specific places where events occurred to the people of Israel, biblical times. You'll remember the rock that Og wanted to crush the people, the place where the parting of the Red Sea was, and so that on one hand was based on extra biblical traditions. So it's Agadah, it's commentary, it's embellishment of the biblical story. Many of the stories, not the part of the Red Sea, but the rock that Og, the king of Bashan, was going to smash the people of Israel with. But it was brought together with halacha. These are the blessings. You must say a blessing when you get to this spot. And then there was a discussion about Lot's wife. Do you say a blessing when something tragic has happened? And there too, a decision in Jewish law, that is halacha. I'm keeping to say it, but so those that are not from the Jewish literature world will get used to. So at some point, I'll just say halacha, meaning Jewish law, Jewish practice. That there's a halachic discussion, a legal discussion about which blessings you make, and the fact that you have to make a blessing not only when good things happen, but when bad things happen as well. And the typical example that people bring there is when still the practice today amongst traditional Jews is when you hear of the death of someone, you say Baruch Dayan HaEmet, praised is the one who is the judge of truth. And at a funeral, or right before the funeral, when the mourners, the close family, that is just the immediate family, they rend their clothes, they'll say it, even the full formula of the blessing, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam dayan haemet. Okay, blessings are all over the place. Again, for those that joined us not at the beginning, the most common blessings that one will hear in a Jewish household or in the synagogues are about the wine, saying the wine sanctification of the day of Shabbat or a holiday, at the Kiddush, or over the candles, or so some are about doing a mitzvah, a commandment. Some are about eating and drinking and smelling and seeing, as we saw in our chapter. When you see a comet, there's a blessing to say, thunder and lightning. Okay, those are all blessings. And in the liturgy itself, there are blessings at different stages of the morning, afternoon, and evening liturgy. That's the basic building block of Jewish liturgy. And the phrase Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam is the beginning, is praised is God, the King of the universe, the Creator, or whatever words that are in vogue. I don't mean that in any derogatory way, what are trendy, because to say King of the universe today is a challenging in many circles to use that kind of wording, and so those blessings, and again, they're really praisings and not blessings, but we'll just refer to them as blessings, are all over, ubiquitous, right? They're everywhere in Jewish liturgy. Now, at some point, we started to hear in the Talmud from a guy named Rav Yehuda, a particular. Who gave us traditions. Traditions were quoted in his name by the editor of this Talmud around the year 600. We don't know exactly. With all of these traditions that he had, or they had, if there were a panel of editors, they quoted Rav Yehuda, and then it's as if somebody says, "Oh, I got another one from Rav Yehuda," as if they opened up the Rav Yehuda file and they kept pulling out cards. Those of us that did academic work, remember, you would write things on cards and then you'd kind of pull them out to build the paper, the whatever it was, the dissertation, whatever you were working on. And so they kept pulling out the cards of Rav Yehuda, and through that they got to the issue of dreams. And then it's as if somebody said, and I purposely use as if, because we don't know how this was really composed, how it was edited. Somebody says, "Oh, dreams, you want to know about dreams? So-and-so said this about dreams, and so-and-so said this about dreams." And so there's like a waterfall, cascade of traditions about dreams. It's almost as if, that was my impression from last week's section, 2 weeks ago section, it's almost as if somebody's just waiting to open up the floodgates. Once it's dreams, we don't talk about we don't talk about dreams, and then everybody has something to say, right? And we see that, right, in public discussions when, or amongst those of us that have worked in teen education, formal education, when you find the right thing and pose in the right way, you open up the door and boom, there's a floodgate. Or in one-on-one counseling, therapy, the same thing happens as well. If the facilitator is wise to find the right door without causing damage, to open it up. And to me, what happened here from a form point of view, this is my week or my month that talked about content and form, as I did in the class yesterday, the importance of form and content, how they go so much together. The form content here is a wonderful metaphor for the content itself. the form of the content is a metaphor for the content, meaning dreams. Dreams are also this gateway into another space, subconscious space. Now, I'm going to say it now, and I'll continue to say it. There is no way that anybody can come and say, what does Judaism say about dreams? Let's narrow it down. There's no way that anybody can say, what do the rabbis in the post-destruction of the temple period have to say about dreams? There's no way that anybody can say, what do the rabbis of the Talmud have to say about dreams? There's no way that anybody can say, what do the rabbis of the Babylonian Talmud, the Babylonian rabbis of the Talmud, have to say about dreams? Because whatever there is, there's the opposite. And that often goes for Talmudic writings. You find this and the other thing too. But in this case in particular, dreams, you will find tidbits here. We already saw last week what dreams were, different statements about dreams. We'll find some more today. And if it resonates with you, take it, go with it, take it home, deal with it, take a look at it, discuss it with yourself or with your family, with your friends at the pub, wherever it might be. But don't take it as a representation with a capital R of rabbinic writings. It is one tradition. It's an oral tradition, or it's a collection of traditions, and that too, and that's also in the realm of form, right? So many different views are brought on the same page. That too is a metaphor for dreams, because dreams are wispy, right? They're not. Do you take them seriously? Do you not? Which ones do you? And so the text itself reflects what I think even today, post-Freud, I'm talking about, in a post-Freudian world of therapy, where yes, dreams may have an importance, but let's take a deep breath and let's take them with a grain of salt. Whoa, that was my unprepared for introduction. It's just somebody opened up the floodgate and it just dropped out. What can I say? Okay. See, Scotty, don't be embarrassed to drink. It's important to drink. So all right. So this is how we got to where we got to in this section of the Talmud. All right. So let's get to it. Okay. I in the beginning I thought I would talk about the place that is either the land of Israel or Babylonia, and the era, the generation, or at least the century of each of the rabbis that are quoted. And I did that quite a bit in the beginning. I'm doing it a little bit less now. More or less, we're talking about the rabbis that are quoted on our page today are from the beginning, the first part of the third, the second part of the third. There's different generations amongst the rabbis, and so there's probably 3 generations to every century in the way they think of it here, and part of the 4th century. So 3rd and 4th century rabbis are conversing with each other. Most of them lived in Babylonia all their lives, but some of them lived in the land of Israel. In this case, one of them, famous, lived in Babylonia but wanted to go to the land of Israel and did. So we don't always know where the traditions are from. And the reason I did that is to show that this whole conversation that's going on here is artificial from a historical point of view. It's ahistorical, because it's an editorial creation in which it feels like different rabbis are conversing with each other, but they lived at different times in different places. Not totally different times, right? They're more or less in the same 200 years, 250 years. So I don't think we'll go there so much anymore, but if somebody has a particular question, or if they're comparing different paragraphs, they want to know who came first, who came after, I'll try to answer those questions as well. Okay, so why don't we begin? Does everybody have the text? I've been talking. If you don't have the text, can we make sure it's in? There it is. It's in the chat box. And shall we begin? Stephen, do you want to read, or you have the text in front of you?
Yeah, I have it. Okay.
Go ahead. Could you read
All right,
please?
Rabbi Bereka said, even though part of the dream is fulfilled, all of it is not fulfilled. From where do we derive this? From Joseph's dream, as it is written, and he said, behold, I have dreamed yet a dream, and behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars bowed down to me. Genesis. And at that time his mother was no longer alive.
Okay. Before we get to the content, just Rabbi Brechia's name, because we've been talking about. Brechia literally means the blessing of God. A bracha shel Yah. Lovely name. And some of you may have grown up. It's not a common name in Israel at all, even in outside of Haredi, ultra-Orthodox circles, but the name Baruch or Bracha. Those are two Hebrew, bracha for a female, Baruch for the Baruch is not either. There's really no kids not a lot of little kids, certainly of the generation of our children that is named Baruch or Bracha. It's kind of old people, old Israeli names. But they're lovely names, and they both mean, one means blessing, the other one means blessed or praised. And the Yah at the end, the Brechia, is the theophoric addition there of God's name. Okay, but that's not. So what do we have here, Stephen? We've got a dream might be fulfilled or not fulfilled. What is the assumption of a sentence like that, of a phrase like that?
Well, I just took it as you dream and it's not literal. It's not going to come 100% true. You kind of have just an impression. But
there's an assumption, though, that dreams do come true. So maybe they don't 100% come true, but the dreaming is a form of prophecy, right? Mm-hmm. And it's an omen of sorts. It's and so it's his way, Rabbi Brechia's way of saying, by the way, Rabbi Brechia, his name Rabbi as opposed to Rav implies that he is from the land of Israel. His tradition is from the land of Israel, but it's a relatively late rabbi, late from the 4th century. In any case, and that also goes to show you that the rabbis that come afterwards, the 3rd century earlier, so the editing is not done in chronological order. The reason this comes here, I think, is because the section we ended with in the previous time had to do with nivuah, with prophecy. And so that kind of dream, but not all dreams are about prophecy, but in the assumption that a dream is prophetic, then okay, some of it will come true, but not all of it. Now we get to Dan's favorite topic of proof texts, right? So somebody says, yeah, well, how do you know that? The students are saying, this is the word of the editor of the Talmud, who says, where do we know this from? It's not Rabbi Brechia, probably. It's probably somebody afterwards that says, where do we know this from? Or it could be Rabbi Brechia saying, and I'll prove it to you. How do you prove things? You go to the Torah. In this case, you go to the Hebrew Bible, but it's always even better if you can go to the 5 books of Moses. And here in the story of Genesis, anybody remember the story? What was the dream?
Yeah.
Do you know? Remember it?
They were bowing down to him, to Joseph. His brothers were bowing down to him. That the stars and the moon, they were bowing down to him.
Right. So it's not. So you gave the explanation before you gave the dream.
Right? Right.
The dream was that there were the sun and the moon and 11 stars bowing down to the one star. And so the one star is Joseph. And okay, now.
Except for Benjamin wasn't born yet, right?
No, Benjamin was already born, and therefore Benjamin was born, but then it says, if Benjamin was born, his mother was no longer alive because she died at childbirth. Right. So
but in the Tanakh, I thought Benjamin hadn't been born by that. Well, it's not in chronological order, we know, but I thought he hadn't been born when Joseph says this. That Rachel wasn't yet. Because it's really to his mother and father in the Tanakh that he says, and then he says 11 brothers. And it's strange because Benjamin hadn't been born yet.
Except for there's different timelines, as you hinted at, right? Not every chapter, if you see this, the way, certainly the way that this is understood here, there is ein mukdam, ein muchar, and in general, there's no earlier and later. The timeline is not a linear timeline, right? So what this little section here assumes is that he dreamt that 11 stars were bowing down to him, along with the sun and the moon, and so that was going to become true because they did come bow down to him in Egypt, except for his mother didn't. Okay, his mother. So in other words, that part of the dream wasn't true. to me, I would have found maybe a better, I don't have a better verse, but it's kind of a weak, a flimsy explanation, which is why Dan is so angry about these kind of proof text things. He's not really angry, I know, but it's not a mathematical. So, and then finally, Malka, when it comes to Agadah, the famous dictum is lo makshin kushiot. You don't ask questions when it comes to Agadah, because the whole thing is it's not about it doesn't go by the rules of reality, the rules of physics, the rules of chronology. It's a and Og living from the time of the flood and surviving the flood on the outside shelf of the ark and living to defeat to go to war with Moses, to be defeated by Moses. None of this stuff works, right? So those are questions you can ask when we're looking at the pshat, the simple meaning of the text. But when we get to Agadah, all bets are off, or all okay, more or less like that. So those otherwise, yeah. Yes, Eileen.
So I looked at the text and it says, are we to come, I and your mother? So I guess that's not relevant. The fact that that the mother was supposedly present, yet here it says she was no longer alive.
Yeah, so the beginning I thought, and that's what I slipped before. Beginning I thought it was talking about after Benjamin's birth, and therefore she was not alive then. But what it's really talking about, what Rabbi Brach or what the explanation is really talking about, is when they come to Egypt. The bowing down didn't happen until Egypt. It didn't happen, and then for sure she was there, right? She died. So what Malka is right about, you can't have 11 brothers on one hand and a mother on the other hand. It's either one, right? Because she died at childbirth. But in any case, by the time of Egypt, she was gone.
Okay.
And so what the Talmud wants to say is the dream came true 95%. The 5% of the mother not being there was not there. Yes, Ella.
Didn't they leave Benjamin behind at one point?
Yes, but then at another point they came up. They came up with everybody, including the
Right.
father. And so the all father, now does it say, I don't think it says that
Because I
Yaakov.
think Joseph demanded to see Benjamin. He
Yes.
knew about him.
Yes. But the bowing down, it may be actually figurative at the end of the story. Again, I don't think we need to get bogged down too much in this. This is less a commentary on the book of Genesis. In fact, it's not really a comment on the book of Genesis, as it is using these verses out of context in order to prove something. That's the whole mechanism of proof text that we've been talking about over the last 2 months or so. Madalena, did you want to say something that you appeared magically, or?
No, I've been here, but I turned on the
No, I
camera.
know you've been there. I just I thought you usually appear. Okay, she's kind of like the Wizard of Oz. Okay, all right. So anything else? So where might we go with it is, okay, you have a dream. And a dream echoes something that's happening, right? Whether it's the garbage pile of your thoughts, or whether it's the cutting room from the days of cutting film, right? The editing room, whether it's fears or fantasies, whatever it is, some truth, maybe not. Here it's majority truth, a small part, not going to happen. Now, where I think that many of us would part with this is that I don't know, maybe there are, but I personally don't think that dreams are a premonition of things to come, right? Even though that is the Jewish tradition, is the normative tradition, is a dream is 1/60th of prophecy. Okay, so there is the dreams of premonition, and then so let's go ahead and see. Developing this idea is the next section. That's building on this idea. Rabbi Levi goes on in the next section. Okay, Claire, you want to read number 2?
Rabbi Levi said, one should always anticipate fulfillment of a good dream up to 22 years. From where do we derive this? From Joseph, as it is written, these are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren. And it is written, And Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. From 17 to 30, how many years are they? 13. Add 7 years of plenty and 2 of famine, the total is 22. And only then was the dream fulfilled, when his brothers came and bowed down to him.
Okay, so well, Dan, you'll check the math for us, okay?
It's right.
There's kind of two ways to go about this, as there are whenever there is a midrash. A midrash is the squeezing of the text, and one particular way of understanding is squeezing of the biblical text, or squeezing of, in this case, the text itself, the Talmud, for how it happened. Is it a midrash yotzer or a midrash mekayem? Is it a creative midrash, a creative hermeneutic, or is it a supporting hermeneutic? Is it creative or supporting? So an example would be from the realm. Let's go right now from the realm of Agadah, where we are now, of what you feel and think, to the realm of what you do. If there is a particular verse that's brought to justify why we have the 4 species, the 4 things we hold together on Sukkot, of the palm frond, the etrog, the citron, the willows, and the myrtle, and we have these 4 that we hold together, and then in the Midrash in Vayikra Rabbah brings a very detailed way of how we understand how we got to each of these particular species from different verses or different ways of understanding. Is that a Midrash that is creative, meaning that it went to the verses and then they said, oh, we're going to use a palm frond. Oh, we look at a verse here, we're going to use a myrtle. Oh, or is it we already have what we're doing, now let's go find the basis for it. And this is what we're all this mechanism of midrash, of proof texts, in this case is all revolves around that. My experience and my feeling is that the vast majority of midrashim are supportive and not creative. It's very rare that somebody said, well, let's see what we should do. And by the way, that goes on, that same phenomena goes on in halachic discourses that people write today. And I was involved in that process when I was on the panel for about 8 years in Israel in the 90s of my rabbinic organization, questions that would come in and we would respond, and one of us would take it on and look into the history of halakha, of Jewish law, look for precedents and for ideas and values, and then write a paper, and then it would be float around, and then we'd work on it. It would be voted on in the end. What I found almost always was people went in the direction they were already in. Nobody went in tabula rasa, right, as a blank say, oh gee, I wonder what the sources are going to tell me about this. They already knew, I don't want it, I don't feel that we should allow this, or I think that we should allow this. Yes, Claire.
So I have a question about the math, because in the text of Genesis, isn't there 7 years of famine as well, not 2?
Yeah. So I think because it took 2 years for them to see that it was going to happen, that it was actually happening. Right? 1 year could have been a fluke.
I see.
I guess.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. Again, this is the same realm of, we don't look in too closely. We don't go into the weeds and these kinds of things, because the probably was what and brought me to my point here. Probably somebody had this number of 22. So they went and they found a way to make 22. You find the same thing with, especially in Hasidic writings, about using numerical value of words and letters to prove something. And if you don't get there, then you say, you find a way to add, and he went before he said it, and the is an aleph, or you add, you find all sorts of ways and you subtract, you take away 2 because he was of 2 opinions that day. You can make anything work. All right. Yeah. Numerology. I was stuck in a guard tower. The last time I did guard duty, in the reserve duty, I was 41 or 42, I was stuck with this crazy guy who was reading numerology. I had a numerology thing he was doing and he didn't shut up for 7 days in a guard tower. Okay, all right. Anything else? So again, I don't think that is this. The idea is don't make a judgment so well, right? Something may take some time to happen, perhaps. Okay, let's go on to see what else. Eileen, please, number 3.
Rav Huna said, a good person is not shown a good dream, and a wicked person is not shown a bad dream. Rather, Steinholtz says, rather, a good person is punished for his relatively few transgressions with bad dreams, and a wicked person is rewarded for his relatively few merits with good dreams. That was also taught. All of King David's life, he never saw a good dream, and all of Atiphol's life, he never saw a bad dream.
Okay, so here it's in the same realm of perhaps things that are going to happen. If you have a dream that something's going to happen, then you have anxiety because of it, because your assumption is that it may happen, that it's a premonition of sorts. Now, this is going from whether it will happen or not, which was the previous topic, to the anxiety it causes, and should it cause you anxiety? And what does that say? What does dreaming say about who you are as a person? And so the example that's given here as a proof text, not a proof text, but a proof thing from biblical literature, is that you've got David and Achitophel, who are often brought up as we're not going to go into the story of Achitophel's advice, bad advice. You can look it up and you can find it yourself in Samuel. But just giving this example of who was one of the greatest heroes and righteous people, which of course those of us who study the simple meaning of the text of Samuel and Kings know that David was far from being a righteous person. But in rabbinic literature, David's absolutely a righteous and a role model. And who is the opposite of that in his life? His foil, so to speak, would be Achitophel. And so how do they know this? Where do you find this? Is this any hint of this in the biblical text? No, but this is for whatever reasons, this is what these are the rumors, these are the stories that floated around, that David did not have a good dream for all of his life. And Achitophel, the opposite. I don't have much to say about this other than we're going to have a number of paragraphs like this, which are throwing out these ideas, and you kind of say, okay, all right. But again, back to the anxiety factor of dreams. That's what I do get out of this, right? People who are constantly dreaming good things, what is that? And I'm not going to go, but one might say, well, because that's their escape, right? If things are not happening well in their life, so they dream good things. Although it doesn't seem to work out that way. I think most people that have a rough time in their life have dreams that are disturbing as well. Anyway, we'll all go where we go with our own experience. But if there's anything else, if there's nothing else, we can go on. Okay. Robert, do you want to read?
Sure.
We're at number 4.
All right. All right, so finish my note there. Is it not written, no evil shall befall you, neither shall any plague come near your tent? Psalm 91:10. And Rav Chisda said that Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba said that this means that you will be frightened neither by bad dreams nor by evil thoughts. Neither shall any plague come near your tent means that you will never find your wife with the uncertain status of a menstruating woman when you return from a journey. Rather, he himself does not see bad dreams, but others see bad dreams about him.
So now we took this challenging statement beforehand about wicked people and good people, and if they see good dreams or bad dreams, whatever. Now comes the Talmud and says, wait a minute, you want to say that? What are you going to do with the verse from Psalms that says, no evil shall befall you, neither shall any plague come near your tent, referring to good people? If you're good, then these things won't happen. And so and Rav Chisda based on the rabbis that came before him, says this applies to bad thoughts, evil thoughts, and bad dreams. And by the way, it gives the entire tradition, which is something we don't even really want to know about. We don't even want to talk about, but we have to mention it because it's here in the text. And by the way, when it says that no plague will come near your tent, that has to do with the unfortunate situation that, and I think this came up already in our text, the unfortunate situation when a man is traveling or a soldier is out to war and he gets a time off or he's coming back home for a few nights, and just as he gets home, he finds that his wife is possibly before her period of nida, in which he's impure and he can't touch her, right? That's kind of that's a bummer, especially when you're a young husband. And I remember this from Army service. We all talked about the fact that we got off for one 24-hour, 48-hour leave of a month of guard duty while we were already married when we in reserve duty, and you get home and boom, right? That's of course we were in our 20s in those days. It was harder. It was much more challenging. So that kind of all that is the part of the challenge. So the answer to the challenge is no. What it's talking about, no evil shall befall, whatever, is not about that he won't have bad dreams. Others may have bad dreams about him, but he won't have bad dreams about himself. What can I say? Okay. Challenging material. Malka, you want to read?
And when he does not see a dream, is that a virtue? Didn't Rabbi Lazar say anyone who sleeps 7 days without a dream is called evil, as it is stated, and he that has it shall lie satisfied. He shall not be visited with evil. Do not read it as satisfied, rather read it as 7. Rather, the Baraita says as follows: David certainly saw dreams, but he did not understand what he saw.
Okay, all right. So could it be that David has no dreams, asked the Talmud? No, of course he had dreams. Yes, but what are we going to do about that verse from Proverbs that says, right, and he shall lie satisfied, which is vesve'a, savea, which means satisfied. And he vesavea, and he won't be visited with evil. How are you going to read that dream? Oh, you're reading it wrong. Don't read vesavea, read vesheva, because they're the same consonants, but with different vowels. They're totally different words, but they're written in the same way. And this is a rather common kind of, we could call it perhaps playful emendation. They're not suggesting that the text is wrong, as we will do sometimes when we read biblical text, and we'll find another parallel text that says, well, the transmission of the text that we have is faulty, where we need to read it differently. It need to be written differently. Here they'll say, no, don't read it this way. Read it with a slight change. Recently, we did a few weeks ago, we Friday night, I think, we brought Limudei Banaich, when the rabbis wanted to talk about those that study bring peace to the world. They use the proof test that have the words limudei banaich, which literally means the studies of your children. And they say, al tikei banaich ela bonaich. Don't read banaich, your children, read bonaich, your builders, your builders. And that refers to the builders of the intellectual palace of the Talmud, right? They bring peace into the world. Don't read this, read that. I mean, it's quite common, in fact, right? And so don't anybody think that David, of course, David dreamt, but right, with it's just a question of 7 days. Okay. And in the end, David dreamt. Of course, he dreamt, but he didn't understand what he saw, and therefore it didn't bother him. I think that's what's implied here. Okay, Megan. We're at number 6, second page.
Second page. Rav Huna bar Ami said that Rabbi Padat said that Rabbi Yochanan said, one who sees a dream from which his soul is distraught should go and have it interpreted before 3. Interpreted? Didn't Rav Hizda say a dream is not interpreted? A dream not interpreted is like a letter not read? Steinsaltz, if one is concerned about a dream, why would he actively promote its fulfillment? Rather, say as follows, he should better it before 3. He should bring 3 people and say to them, I saw a good dream. And they should say to him, it is good, and let it be good. May God make them. May God make them, I saw a good dream. And they should say to him, it is good, and let it be good. May God make it good. May they decree upon you from heaven in 7 times that it will be good, and it will be good. Afterwards, they recite 3 verses of transformation, 3 of redemption, and 3 about peace.
Okay, let's take it down into different parts. The first part is, right, something that happens if you're upset about a dream. So what do? You go before 3. What does 3 imply here? Anybody?
3 rabbis?
Yeah, a
Eighteen.
beit din, right? A beit din. The same way that a rabbinical court, same way you do conversion before a beit din, you do a divorce, all different things. So it's that important. Go before 3, a panel of rabbinic judges, and tell them about the dream. But then the Talmud says, yeah, but didn't we already say in the section from 2 weeks ago that an uninterpreted dream is not a dream? In other words, if you don't interpret the dream, it can't happen. Don't open up the Pandora's box, right? Why would you possibly do that, as Steinsaltz says in his commentary, which is assumed here by people, if you know that, right? You're supposed to know that, right? So why would you do that? Why would you ask questions and get into trouble? Just leave it be, leave the dream be. And there's, of course, some wisdom in there as well. And then they say, no, you're not reading it right. It's not that you go to the 3 to get interpreted so something bad will happen. You go to 3 for specific purpose of them making the dream good, gooding the dream, right? They're going to change the reality of the dream that was whatever entity it was. The 3 have the power to change that. And what's the process for doing that? And you got into trouble here with the words because the words are very redundant, right? The words are, it reminds me of something I watched on TV, and she goes to a fortune on a White Lotus. She goes to a fortune teller, tarot card. She's telling the bad things are going to happen. She says, I don't want this one. She's so negative, right? And if anybody saw it, you okay. Anyway, and what people will say as well, when somebody is trying to mentor you or help you and you're getting negative criticism, well, you're being so negative about it. Be positive, talk positive, just talk positive, everything will be all right. That's kind of what it feels like, but it's not just that. There's this 7 times of doing something, and then 3 verses, 3 verses, 3 verses. If I didn't know it was in the Talmud, my immediate reaction would be, this must be Kabbalistic, right? It has to do with magic. Things where repetitions of 3s and 7s especially are in the realm of that kind of magical inclination that we do find a bit, not a lot, in rabbinic literature. They kind of frowned upon that. We find it more in midrashic literature and certainly in medieval Jewish literature, and with the advent of Kabbalah as well, especially, there's a lot of this kind of thing, right? These are the things you must do. Now it's going to go into details as to the 3 verses, that 3 verses transformation, 3 of redemption, 3 about peace. It could very well be that you were the Beit Din, the 3 were told they need to come up with 3 verses, and you could find all sorts of verses, and that only afterwards somebody kind of codified it by saying, no, these are the 3 verses you're going to use for each of these topics. So Dan, why don't you quickly go through these, and then we're going to talk about what I talked, the nexus between Agadah on one hand and Halakha on the other hand. And that'll be our final step for today. So Dan, if you could read 7, 8, and 9. I don't know that we need to stop for each of the verses, but if there's something, please, if there's something that somebody wants to talk about, just interrupt. Go ahead.
Oh, let me turn my phone off. I'm sorry. Excuse me. Okay. Sorry.
We're at 7.
3 transformations. You transformed my mourning into dancing. You loosed my sackcloth and girded me with gladness. Then shall the virgin rejoice in the dance, and the young men and the old together. For I will transform their mourning into joy and will comfort them and make them rejoice from their sorrow, from Jeremiah. And nevertheless, the Lord your God would not hearken unto Balaam, but the Lord your God transformed the curse into a blessing for you.
So 3 verses that prove that transformation, one thing into another, is possible, from bad to good mostly. Go ahead.
And 3 redemptions, as it is written. He has redeemed my soul in peace, so that none came near me. For they were many that strove with me, from Psalms. The redeemed of the Lord shall return and come singing unto Zion, and everlasting joy shall be upon their heads. They shall obtain gladness and joy, and sorrow and sighing shall flee away, from Isaiah. The people said to Saul, shall Jonathan die, who has wrought this great salvation in Israel? So the people rescued Jonathan, that he died not, from 1 Samuel's.
And so the interesting thing with redemption, the possibility of redemption, is not just God, but human beings as well who can do this redemption. And finally,
3 mentions of peace, as it is written. Peace, peace to him that is far off, and to him that is near, says the Lord that creates the expression of the lips, and I will heal him, from Isaiah. Then the Spirit clothes Amasai, who is chief of the captains. Yours are we, David, and on your side, you son of Yishai. Peace, peace be unto you, and peace be to your helpers, from Chronicles. Thus you shall say, all hail and peace be both unto you, and peace be to your house, and peace be unto all that you have, from Samuel.
so assuming this describes a ceremony that actually happened, I don't think that's difficult. I don't think it's totally hypothetical. Somebody has a dream that they're very anxious about, and they go to a Beit Din, to a panel of 3 sages who will talk very positively about, don't worry this, and then they will say, whatever it was, it can be transformed. Whatever dread you have, you will find redemption. And whatever happens, you will have peace. It's total positive communication. And I'm wondering, is this a therapy? Is this a therapeutic practice in reality for those that were really suffering from anxiety? I don't think this would help with depression, but I think with anxiety, and when we think of what we do in our interactions with folks or what others have done with us, there are some good suggestions here, perhaps, right? Although what I found personally is the best thing is just to be quiet and listen. But this is a traditional way. Now, when I spoke in the beginning of today, this nexus between the world of halacha and agadah meaning the issues of dreams and the talk about David, whether he dreamt or not, the usage of all these verses to talk about something which is not something in practice, but an idea about redemption and peace, whatever, all that is agadah. And yet it's been thrown on this side of the page, especially, it's been thrown into the realm of halacha, of what you do. And I didn't bring it because I didn't think we'd have time. I thought this would take up the whole time because I'm noticing that we usually go over and I'd rather stay into an hour. But perhaps we'll begin next week with a sampling of halachic literature. For instance, the Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Yosef Karo, 16th century, cites that when one has a bad dream, one has a dream that is causing one anxiety, one goes to a Beit Din. And they will, I forgot his words, but going to a Beit Din, his words is something like, it's as effective as wood is, as fire is on sawdust or chips of wood, meaning that it's very effective to get rid of it. It's a really good solution to the problem. And then the interpretations of Rabbi Yosef Karo in the 16th century in Tzfat that go down, at least I saw the Mishnah Berurah, who was Chofetz Chaim, which is the end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century, who goes into detail about this as well, which means if it's in the Mishnah Berurah, then it's in the Orthodox world today. Maybe not modern Orthodox, but certainly yeshiva world and the ultra-Orthodox world, that these are the kind of things that people may still do. And so to me, that's that. And yeah, that I think that's the main issue that I wanted to end with. Even when you have an issue of Agadah, it'll easily seep into the world of what we actually do in practice. Yes.
The
Malka.
question.
Mhm.
So they're saying you have to go to 3 to a big din. Would it be suffice halakhically if you just did 3 verses of redemption, 3 verses of peace, and 3 verses of transformation for yourself?
That's a
And
good question.
go to the big din?
Yeah, I only looked in the Shulchan Aruch and the Mishnah Berurah today. So I think that what I'll do for next time, because this is an interesting topic, I think, again, not because it's interesting for people because it's dreams, I understand. But I think it's interesting from an academic point of view, it is for me at least, because it is this meaning of both words. What has happened with this Talmudic verse, this Talmudic section in practice, in practicum, is what your question is, right, Malcolm?
Right.
You know, we live in a self, so what, do I really need to pay money? Will my insurance cover the Beit Din for that? We gotta, or does this feature in self-help books? These are the things. Look, there are self-help books that use Psalms, right? My friend is about to publish one, right? So yeah. So let me take a look at that, and I'll prepare that for next week if that's all right. Okay, instead of but good. And any other comments or questions or just impressions or anxieties? You have more than 3 here. Scotty, you're not going to tell us about your dreams?
Is there any anything that has to do with like recurring dreams? It's a kind of a theme in modern life.
Yeah, and it was then as well. I think that's going to come up later on in the Talmud. I don't know if we'll get to that section, but yeah. We're going to get to some seriously bizarre things about what people say that or if one dreams about, yeah, I won't give it away, but
I dream about Palm Springs.
Palm Springs, there you go. And Scotty's dreams come true. Many of you don't know Scotty is here every year to visit. Scotty actually has visited Sasha and me in the far reaches of the world in Sweden. We met we meet a lot. Scotty lives in Washington, D.C., and he's been out here. Many of you have met him. He gave a lecture on Chana Senish just last year. Okay, anything else? All right. Well, I admire your perseverance, everybody, because this stuff is a little bit weird, and it is very, very different from the material that we covered in the previous iteration of this group studying together the Acts of the Apostles. Although much of it was written around the same time, wasn't it? Yeah. So, but very different kind of literature. Okay. All right, everybody, have a good. We've got somebody asking, doesn't dream interpretation fall into the real fortune telling? Oh, so somebody wanted to know if dream interpretation doesn't fall under the category of fortune telling, and fortune telling is not allowed. What's not allowed is necromancy. I think that's what's called necromancy, right? That's not allowed. And as far as tarot cards and things like that, it's kind of on wavering. What the rabbis in the Talmud say, and I don't know where it's at. I think maybe I don't know where it's a famous quote of Talmudic quote, but I don't remember the reference. Is Ein Mazal Yisrael? There is no fate in that way for Israel. In other words, those things exist, but Jewish people have the possibility of avoiding them, to which I understand is that anybody has the possibility, is that while there might be fate, you can change your fate, right? By the acts you do, you can change what's going on. So yeah, but no, obviously, at least according to all these rabbis here, you're in going to interpret a dream under certain circumstances is definitely permissible or maybe even obligatory, as we'll check it next week. Okay. Okay, everyone. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.